Okay, we made it. Okay, so, hey Algebra 1A, I just wanted to reassure you guys that we are going to have class as usual. It's just going to be done over YouTube. So I expect you guys to be taking notes because this is going to help you for the test at the end of the unit. So I just want to shift gears and get into absolute value because it can be taught over the internet and also it strengthens your solve for X skills. All right, let's get to work. So I want to talk about absolute value because a lot of people get confused about it. They like the simplest definition for it, but I always think of this particular story every single time I hear about absolute value. So I remember when I was in ninth grade and I took PE in the spring of 2003, and at my high school we had a track. And in order to, before we got into PE, we had to get dressed. We had to get in our PE uniform because we had a dress code. It was a Catholic school. So we had a dress code. We got in the locker room. We went out the locker room. We went down the stairs, down the bleachers, and through the gate, and we started our laps around the track. Side note, each lap around the track is a quarter mile. So one lap is 1/4 of a mile. 2 laps would be 2/4 or 1/2 of a mile. 3 laps would be 3/4 of a mile, and 4 laps would be a complete mile. So let's just clear it out of the way. All right, so in PE, we had to do 2 warm-up laps around the track. So nobody there was no reason why we did this direction, but the idea is there were 25 boys in the class, and we just got on the track, and we just started at that black line through the gate, and we just ran our 2 laps counterclockwise. Nobody told us to, we just did it. So 25 boys running their 2 laps in this direction. But we had one classmate, and I remember this, he was a funny guy. And he would always run the laps, but when the coach wasn't looking, he would get to like maybe right there at the track and cut across the football field. And sometimes he'd get away with it, a lot of times he wouldn't, but then the coach would yell at him, "You get back to the starting line and you're doing a 3rd lap, do you understand me?" And it just brought a smile to my face, it was pretty funny. But on the day of the mile, so remind me again, 1 lap is 1/4 of a mile. So 2 laps, we did our 1/2 a mile warm up every single day. But on the day of the mile, we had to do 4 laps. And that one classmate who would always would try to cut across when the coach wasn't looking, he said on the mile run day, "Hey coach, I'm gonna run the laps in the other direction because it's gonna be shorter." Now, I'm not a great artist, so I apologize if one of these looks bigger than the other. So imagine 25 kids in the class. Okay? This is the black line because the gate opens up here and you enter. So imagine 24 boys doing the mile run counterclockwise and 1 boy doing 4 laps clockwise. We're just jogging, we're having a good, like, dude, what are you doing, man? Just so distracting. So the big question I want to ask is, 24 boys went the green direction, counterclockwise. 1 boy went clockwise 4 laps. So who went farther? 4 laps counterclockwise or 4 laps clockwise? Ignore the fact that there's an inner track and an outer track. We didn't stay in one track, by the way. The answer is, it doesn't matter. 1 mile is 1 mile. 4 laps is 4 laps. 4 laps forward in the green direction, majority rule, so it's going to be forwards. And 4 laps backwards, it's still 4 laps. So I'm going to put this right there. So this is 4 laps in the positive direction versus 4 laps backwards right? And I don't mean he ran backwards. I don't mean he ran backwards like he ran. like he was facing forward and moving backwards. No, I mean he was running forward in the other direction. The question is, does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. We didn't have Fitbits back in 2003, but if you had a Fitbit and you ran 4 laps forward, it would count as 4 laps on the Fitbit. If you ran 4 laps in the red direction, the other direction, your Fitbit, it doesn't matter to your Fitbit. Your Fitbit doesn't care. 1 mile is 1 mile. So, 4 laps forward, it doesn't matter. They both went the same distance. I'm going to let you guys absorb that. Okay? And yeah, that really happened. Okay? I'm going to give you guys time to absorb that. I'm going to. Okay, so let's define the absolute value. I'm going to erase the board. So, remember you can pause the video and rewind the video at your pleasure. At your leisure, I should say, not your pleasure. I'm sure you'd rather be playing video games than me watching a math lesson right now. So anyway, at your leisure, you may rewind and pause the video. So let's define the absolute value. So the absolute value, symbolized by these bars. So when we take the absolute value, basically we put a number inside 2 vertical lines. I like to make them a little bit thick so that they don't look like ones. So the absolute value, put them in the bars, is defined as the distance from the origin, usually 0. From the origin. Let me get out of your way. So the distance from the origin, usually 0. When you get to algebra 2, it isn't always 0. Okay? So, let's get some problems in. So let's evaluate the following. So I like to put thought bubbles, I like to put little characters in here, because I like to show how this works besides just the quick fix. So for example, let's take the absolute value of, I'm filling the number 4. So you just draw 2 vertical lines and a 4 in the middle. It is not the number 141, just FYI. So the absolute value of 4. So we call this the absolute value of 4. Now remember, is the number 4 positive or negative? Feels like Dora the Explorer, doesn't it, with the pause, doesn't it? The absolute value of 4. Is 4 positive or negative? It's positive, right? So the question that you're asking yourself is the distance from the origin. How far is 4 steps forward from the origin? Actually, from 0. Let's make that shorter. So if I got a number line, right? If I got a number line, let's just say I go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I go -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Okay? So let's say I go let's say I go 4 steps forward. How far is 4 steps from 0? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. So 4, the positive 4 rather, is 4 steps away from 0. So we call the absolute value of 4, 4. I know what you're thinking. That sounds super easy. Well, It is, but I really expect you guys to be able to define it because the algebra part of it is not as friendly. Okay? Now, the second problem. The absolute value, right? I'm going to erase number 1. I'm going to erase the problem now. Get back over there. So number 2 is the absolute value of -3. Read this. You see these bars, the inside. This is the absolute value of -3. Now I know what you're thinking. What's the difference? I draw a little smiley face, I have a little cartoon character. I ask myself, how far is 3 steps backwards from 0? So I go 3 steps backwards to -3. 3 steps is 1, 2, 3. 3 steps away from 0. Remember, the Fitbit doesn't care what's forwards or what's backwards. It cares about how many steps you take. So the absolute value of -3 is 3. So to answer your question, whatever is in the bars gets spit out as its positive output. So inside, if it's a positive number, it stays positive on the outside as the output. If it's if it's a negative number inside the bars, it gets spit out as a positive number. Okay? So I'm going to take the number line out. I'm not going to do the thought bubble for all of them, but I'm going to ask you. So let's erase and let's do some more problems. Okay. Okay. All right, number 3. Okay, so we're going to do these up to 11, and then we'll call it a day. Okay. So, the absolute value of 14. Well, the absolute value of 14. So besides, it's always positive. It's always positive. That's a big hint. Well, what am I asking myself? How far is 14 steps forward? The Fitbit doesn't care. If I go 14 steps forward, I still go 14 steps. Okay? Let's get away from steps and let's just say, actually no, let's stay with the steps. Number 4, the absolute value of -28. Well, what's the question asking me? How far is 28 steps backwards from the origin? How far is 28 steps going backwards from 0? 28 steps backwards is still 28 steps. The Fitbit doesn't care. The absolute value of 103. Let's say I go 103 steps forward. How far did I go? It's not meant to trick you. 103 steps forward is still 103 steps. The Fitbit doesn't care. Okay? Let's say I go 96 steps backwards. How far is 96 steps backwards from the origin? 96 steps backwards is still going to register as 96 steps on my day. Does the rule still apply to fractions? You bet it does. The absolute value of 3/4. Well, let's say I go 3/4 of a mile forward. 3/4 of a mile forward is still 3/4 farther than normal, so it's still 3/4. Let's say my goal is to go 7/8 of a mile, but I go, quote unquote, the wrong direction. Well, negative 7/8 in the absolute value bars, the absolute value of negative 7/8 is still 7/8. Right? The absolute value of 10.68, it's still 10.68. Make that a little bit clearer. There we go. The absolute value of negative 17.3 is still 17.3. And finally, for the last problem of the day, how far is 0 from 0? All right, Fitbit, I'm going to go 0 steps. Awesome. Awesome. 0 steps is still 0 steps from the origin. I didn't go anywhere. Okay. This looks like a successful day. I will see you guys on Thursday.